are nights on the NHL calendar that draw anticipation like any other. Tonight, an iconic Winnipeg Jet makes his return as a member of the New York Rangers. Former captain Blake Wheeler, longtime Winnipeg Jet, makes his return as a member of the Broadway Blue Shirts. This marks the second return for a former Winnipeg Jet this month. We'll talk about that and more. Welcome to the Ultimate Hockey Show. Michael Dale alongside Rick Petty. Good evening, Rich. How are you?
Very good, Michael. How about you?
Yeah, this is the almost, I don't quite want to say my favorite part of the week, but
Don't say that. Don't say that. I'll
it's
get a. I
it's
will
right
get a
up there.
head. What's
It's
that?
right it's right up there with favorite things that I like to do
Okay.
during my week. It's for sure my favorite thing to do on Monday. So it makes my Monday go by
Okay. And I'm
quicker.
just going to say right now for your girlfriend, Kat, I didn't make him say that. He did that all on his own. If he thinks spending an hour with his uncle, or sorry, with his friend Rick is better than spending time with you, I can't. I have nothing to do with that. That's his call, not mine. So I'm just putting it out there. Just yeah.
Fair enough. The secret was almost out of the hat. Yes. I mean, it's fair to say we are related, but have we ever said that publicly?
Nope. Not
No.
that I know of. I don't think so.
Well, in case you wonder why our on-air connection seems to be top-notch sometimes, but I think the person on the right of this screen is the one that keeps the show on the rails, when the guy on the left apparently has a lot of learning to do when it comes to making playoff picks.
We'll see.
But anyway, all jokes aside, welcome to the Ultimate Hockey Show. My favorite Monday, part of my Monday, and as I said, right up there with favorite things to do every week, and in particular when the Winnipeg Jets are winning. It is more fun. There is less drama to deal with. There was less sort of speculating on our part. Um, yeah, as I said in the opening, second more notable Winnipeg Jet makes his return to Winnipeg this month. The first was Pierre-Luc Dubois. Tonight is former captain Blake Wheeler. Blake Wheeler did address the media in Winnipeg, and I just got an alert on my phone. It says this: Blake Wheeler opens up is the headline. Veteran at peace with losing Jets captaincy, had some growing up to do. Uh,
Oh
so
wow.
that's an article if you want to read it later.
Yeah.
Um, First off, Rick, let's start with this. The last couple of years with Blake Wheeler has been, I don't know if polarizing would be the right word. Because at the beginning of his time in Winnipeg, particularly the beginning of his tenure, was one of a lot of success. Wheeler, little lad, by extension as well, he was the first to sign a contract. Um, First to sign a contract extension to put his roots in Winnipeg, so the franchise owes him a lot in that regard. However, in the last 2 to 3 seasons, the Blake Wheeler sort of honeymoon, if you will, uh, seems to have dissipated to the point where, well, people forgot what he did when he first came here.
Yeah.
So that's why, from that sort of explanation, it's the only reason that I say the Blake Wheeler era was kind of polarizing, because you had the good, and then toward the end, well, it wasn't so good. Um, but what stands out about Blake Wheeler to you in his time here in Winnipeg?
Well, actually, a few things. Yeah, I agree with you. Like he's the one. I think you're right. He was the first guy to sign a long-term deal with the Jets. Like all those guys came with contracts, and he was the first star or player of significance, maybe say it that way, covers a bigger area, to sign a long-term deal where people said nobody's going to want to sign long-term in Winnipeg, yada, yada, yada. And Blake Wheeler did that. So you're right. I mean, I think, you know what? I think this is what I'll say. I'll say time will make the relationship between Blake Wheeler and the Jets and the fans, it'll make it better. It'll make it more, there'll be more rose on the or more shine on the rose, or more shine on the glass, whatever analogy you want to use. I just think it'll be time. I think it's still a little bit raw. It's still a little bit recent, which makes it hard. There's some people, he's a very polarizing figure. I'll just tell you this. My dad and I mean, we go to games together. We talk about stuff. We agree on a lot of stuff with the Jets, but he has never been a fan of Blake Wheeler, and I've always been a fan of Blake Wheeler. And you just have to understand what he is as a player. He's a first or second line right winger. He is more of a passer than a shooter or a scorer. He's more the guy, he sees the ice really well. His years in Winnipeg, he was really good in the corners when he played with Little and Ladd. He was really good in the corners, set up Ladd for a ton of goals, and Little too. Could see the ice really well and was big, was not afraid to mix it up, and could skate really well. And he did his role very, very well. And there was a stretch about from maybe 2014 to 2018, maybe 2019, kind of in that stretch there, those 5 years, 6 years, whatever, where you could argue he was the best right winger in the NHL, maybe other than Nikita Kucherov or then Kucherov, other than him, because he would get 80 to 90 points every year, 60 to 70 assists, and he played on a team that wasn't very strong. So in a lot of years up until 2018, in the early, like in 2013, 14, 15, they were a one-line team, the Jets. They had Little Ladd and him, and then it was a real drop-off after that. And so teams could key on that line, and they still scored a ton of goals and generated a lot of offense. So I really like Blake Wheeler, but the problem was, and here's where I think it is that these long-term deals where you sign guys and you have to sign them ahead of their UFA status in order to hang on to them. When he signed that deal at whatever that was, 28, 29, 30, whatever, right before UFA, the Jets probably signed him for too long. It was 8 years, I think, at $8.5 million, and that was probably 2 years too long. But you have to do that because he's not going to sign a 5 or 6 year deal. Otherwise, he's going to test free agency. So
he didn't get that money somewhere.
He's going to get it somewhere. And so a lot of teams, what they do, and the Jets are forced to do too, is they sign him to the 8 year deal, because I think if he went somewhere else, he could only get 7 years. That's the one advantage you have, I guess, as the team that holds his rights. The same thing like with Scheifele and with excuse me, with Hellebuck, is that you could sign him for a little bit longer. But the problem is the last few years, the rate of return on that contract is not great. And you could see Wheeler, his play level just dropped off. So what do? He was playing second line last year. He probably, any other team, he'd be playing third or fourth line. Look at now at the Rangers. He's on the fourth line and he gets 5 to 10 minutes a game.
Yeah, and under a minute of power play time, which 5 to 7 years ago in Winnipeg, Blake Wheeler under a minute of power play time would have been unimaginable.
I know that. So that's what I'm saying. So you got to sign him to these deals, and then what happens is now when the play drops off, inevitably is the media and the media say, "Oh, Wheeler," and the fans get on it. Oh, and then you heard all the chat rooms and everything else. Listen, he was a great Jet for 10 years. The last year or two that he was with the Jets, okay, he's in his late 30s. His play dropped off. He was hardly ever injured. He played 75 to 80 games every year, sometimes 82 games a year. He was rugged. He was durable. He was the captain. He stood up for his teammates. Now, I heard stories about things that, like he said, he had a lot of growing up to do. I heard there were issues sometimes in the dressing room with him. He didn't get along with Laine great. Other people said that he sometimes was a little too cliquey in the dressing room, that he only had his guys and then he didn't talk with other guys. Well, you shouldn't be like a captain. As a captain, you got to be friends with everybody. If you're a captain and you're in a clique, you shouldn't be captain, because you got to be able to talk to everybody in your team, because you got to call everybody out if you need to, including yourself. And I think that's where maybe his maturity level, he has to grow up. And now this is humble pie for Blake Wheeler. I mean, I tell you something, I was watching the game the other night. They were playing whoever they played the last game. That was in Vancouver. He played 3 minutes and 20 seconds in the first period. Like 3 minutes. Yeah, that's, what is that? 3 shifts, maybe 4 shifts. Like, I think the whole game he maybe had 9 or 10 minutes, no power play. He hasn't had a point yet. He's -4 for the year. So I'm saying is, I think Blake Wheeler, this is his last year of hockey, because he's not going to get signed anywhere else. It's going to be a humbling experience. He's going to be where a lot of other guys are, and he has a chance to win a cup. Maybe he'll be a larger part of it come playoffs. Maybe he plays a little bit of a larger role, especially if there's some injuries with New York. Who knows what happens? But for me personally, I think Blake Wheeler was a great Jet, and his legacy, his whatever you want to call that, his legacy, his story, what fans remember, will only age better and better over time. I just think people will remember more and more fondly all the good things, and not care about the things like, oh, sometimes in the dressing room he was like this, or sometimes with the media he was a little bit edgy. Listen, I'd be edgy too if the media asked some of the dumb questions that they ask him. If they asked me that, I think I'd be just as edgy, especially after you lose a game. How do you feel, Blake? You guys lost 6-1. How do you feel? Yeah, well, how do you think I feel? I don't feel good. I just lost 6-1. What kind of a question is that? But again, you're captain. You got to bite your tongue. You got to say all the right things. Yeah, we didn't play well. 60 minutes, didn't finish our checks, didn't get the pucks in deep, blah, 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 blah. So it's just whatever. So all that to say, I like Blake Wheeler. I think he's got a great legacy with the Winnipeg Jets. He will forever be in Winnipeg Jets 2.0. I think it'll be him, Scheifele, and Byfuglien right now are sort of the 3 that you will forever remember because of their time and how they played and who they were. How about for you? How do you see Blake?
Yeah, just for context, I was looking this up while you were talking.
Yeah.
Blake Wheeler's played in 8 games, no points, averaging total time on ice 11 minutes 39 seconds a game, and about 27 seconds a game on the power play. He has 3 hits, 3 blocks, 4 penalty minutes, 14 shots on net. He's a -3. Maybe his most flattering stat is that he's about 100% efficiency on the faceoffs. I would venture to guess that might be 1 or 2 faceoffs, and there's not much to be read into that. But it's interesting because I subscribe to a lot of what I said, right? Like, and you and I know this, like when we first started this show, which was probably right around the time where the Jets started coming back, we were every second week, and now we're every week, because that's just what we do. But I would say for me, like, I have a Blake Wheeler 26 jersey hanging in my closet that I won, a few years after the Jets came back. Like, he was the top end player, and listen, at the risk of repeating myself, I don't want to repeat myself, but toward the end of his career is where you had a lot of this problem of a drop off in play, drop off in ice time, drop off in production, sort of a reluctance to be down the lineup.
Yeah.
To be honest, I think Blake Wheeler overstayed his welcome at times.
But he has no control over that. Yeah, but he has no control over that.
No, but I think he stayed a year too long.
But that's not him. That's Chevy. Then Chevy should have.
No, I know. I realize that, and I think last year they tried to do it by removing the captaincy, but it seemed, like in talking to people that were in the dressing room, Wheeler was still not de facto captain, even though he didn't have a letter. There was a lot of interesting scenarios here. Really quickly, let's get to the comments here. Robert left a couple. Wheeler was given too much power when he inherited the captaincy from Andrew Ladd. What's the captain supposed to do, right?
Yeah,
He's supposed
power. Yeah. I know I see his other comment is him saying, is he the biggest problem for why Line wanted to or asked to be traded?
right,
A lot of this is speculation, right? Like this is, I would say not rumor mongering, but
right.
this was never written about in the newspapers. This is all in social media, and people said, "Oh, I heard so and so
Yeah,
said this about
I
so and
heard,
so
yeah.
in a bar. Oh, I overheard um, this hockey player talking with this hockey player while I was at Earl's downtown, and they were complaining about this, that." Like, okay, it's all innuendo and it's all interesting and it's very exciting, but what's proven? I can't prove anything. I can just
Right.
tell you that just how it was. I agree with you. Last year, even though the Jets had a pretty good team and they played really well that first chunk of the season up until Christmas, and then their play fell off, I think, for a number of different reasons. But there was something. I agree with you. I don't know what it was, but there was something where that whole mix of leadership and who was in charge. There was no captain. It was all associate captains, and he was removed from captaincy and whatever. And now I've just heard, compared to last year, compared to this year, in general, this has been reported publicly, is that the players have. This is what reporters are saying, is that is there
More of a say it's their room.
yeah, but there's a livelier room. There's a happier room that, the reporters that spoke and who spoke to the coaches and who reported themselves from their experience is that they just sense it's a completely different room. And what's the biggest factor that has changed from last year to this year? Blake Wheeler. I mean, a few other players have gone goodbye, also Pierre-Luc Dubois, but Blake Wheeler and Pierre-Luc Dubois are gone. And so I think, to your point, I think having Adam Lowry there is a really good captain. He's one of those guys, he's not going to play a lot of power play, but he's glue. And he's a guy that can be friends with everybody. He's a guy that knows how to talk with everybody. And he plays the kind of game that never cheats. Like, he never cheats. He never takes an offensive chance if it means putting his team at risk. And so you need that guy to be your captain, because he's going to be the guy that when somebody else does it, nobody's going to say, "Oh yeah, well, look at you." Because Wheeler, I could just think, for example, he's minus 30 last year, or the year before was minus 30 with Scheifele. They were 1-2 in the league in plus minus and not on the good side. Well, how can he call anybody out for not playing well defensively or not checking back on a 3-on-2 when he's the last guy back and he's minus 30 or 35 for the year? So I'm just saying it's tough. And so
it's hard to criticize others' games when you're not leading by example.
Exactly. And you don't have to be a first line center. Like, I know some teams, they pick, the McDavid. I get it. The superstar, or Sidney Crosby. I get it. He's your superstar player. Totally makes sense. But with the Jets, they don't. You could say, well, Mark Scheifele, but I think Mark Scheifele, in some ways, he's tied a little bit and scarred, stained, whatever you want to call it, from Blake Wheeler and being too close to him. Adam Lowry or Josh Morrissey would have been, either one of those guys was a great pick. I'm glad they picked Adam Lowry. Now they have Morrissey and Scheifele as associate captains. And I've just heard the team is different. And if the team is happy and the room is better, that already makes it better. And that's just the way it is. You know what? Guys get older, they move on. And like you say, it's hard. How do you change that, right? A guy's production drops off. How do you keep him as captain when really he shouldn't even be getting second line minutes? He's probably playing on the third. Like last year, Wheeler should have been on the third line. Maybe you could even argue the fourth line. Most of his points were scored because he was playing with better players or because he was on the power play. So. Right. But anyway,
and you take top end guys off the power play that are used to being on the power play, their offensive numbers will be lower. It's just,
exactly. But all that stuff about Line and and some of the other guys that didn't like playing with Wheeler and whatever else, I don't know. I could go down that road, but how much of it is true? How much of it is a little bit true? Is it a lot true? I don't know. You'd think as a captain he would know how to be a great player and be a great teammate. Like, how hard is that? If you're captain, I don't know, like do you need a manual that's handed to you how to be a good hockey captain? I mean, page 1, maybe you could write in every page, be a friend to everybody on your team. That's, I mean, how hard is that, right? Like, but for some guys, maybe it's harder.
Here's a question kind of off it out of demo just on the ice.
Sure.
It's somewhat tied to Blake Wheeler, but I don't think it's an accident. Mark Scheifele and Blake Wheeler were tied together at the hip for a lot of what went on. What do you think of Mark Scheifele's play this year? I think we're seeing a better version of Mark Scheifele, but reminds me of the year that the Jets went to the Western Conference Final. He seems engaged. He seems active. He seems to be wanting to be a leadership role, and he seems to be wanting to engage with the media. He seems to be back checking. His plus minus stats overall are better. To me, this is the best version we've seen of number 55 since maybe they went, to the Western Conference Finals. I'm just wondering, what have you seen from Mark Scheifele? Because people are forgetting Scheifele and Wheeler were tied together at the hip. Now you remove, part of that. Part of my question, and I don't think it was addressed enough, is how does Mark Scheifele react, to losing his buddy? And everything was said, about the contract extension, yada, yada, yada. Mark Scheifele seems to be doing pretty well without Blake Wheeler, all things considered.
I agree. I would agree with everything you've said. Maybe it's just he said, I have to build my own reputation. I have to build my own legacy away from Blake. I mean, there'll always be good friends, I'm sure. That's not the question. But I agree with you. I think he's got something to prove now, like that I can be a great player in my Winnipeg Jets 2.0 career separate from Blake Wheeler. 1.0 was tied at the hip with Blake Wheeler. Now 2.0 is I'm on my own and I'm an associate captain. And I'm the first line center on this team. And I'm now a veteran and I got to drive the bus with this team. And I agree with you. He has been way more engaged this year, even defensively in his own zone. I don't know what his plus minus is. They were on the ice for a few goals, him and Connor. I guess it is what it is. That's how they play. I can hardly wait until what's his name? Veraldi? Gabriel
Velarde.
I say Veraldi. Yeah. Velarde. Until he comes back, because we only saw a few games with him. He is going to help that line because he's a centerman playing on the right wing. He is defensively sound. He's a big cat. He's going to help that line. Whereas Wheeler, I think he just did not play that side of the game as well anymore because he was older. Maybe he didn't want to. He couldn't anymore. But Connor and Scheifele together, they're always going to lean more on the offensive side. They'll always be a little bit of a defensive liability. Are they going to be as neat and tidy as a fourth line, a checking unit? No, but that's not their game. So as long as they can keep the minuses to a minimum and score enough goals on the other side, I'm okay with that. But I agree with you. He is way more engaged, way more involved on all
with
ends.
It, sort of say.
Yeah.
He's way more involved.
Yep.
The other thing I wanted to talk about is one of the Jets are actually sporting, according to Sport Logic, one of the best lines in the NHL as far as Corsi and all of that, expected goals for, goals against, that kind of thing. It's the line of Mason Appleton, Adam Lowry, and Alex Iafallo.
Are you sure it's not Nito Niederreiter?
Oh, sorry, Nito Niederreiter. You're right.
They're awesome. That could be the best third line in the NHL.
Oh, yeah, it is Nito Niederreiter.
Right. For scoring, for hitting, for time in the offensive zone. I mean, they dominated against Montreal. I know we'll talk about that, but to me, the Jets they should have won that game. I mean, there's a lot of, but you know what the problem is? That line aside, the problem is they can't score in the power play and they can't stop a power play goal. They allow one power play goal a game, almost every game. I think every game they've played this year except one, they've allowed one power play goal. Some they've allowed two, and they can't score in the power play. They get 4 power plays, 5 power. They don't score. Well, if you don't score in the power play and you let in a power play goal, you're -1 just like that. So then what?
It's
And that's if
amazing,
they would have
right?
scored one power play goal on Saturday, they would have won that game. And they should have being up 3-1 in that game, they should
Yeah.
have won that game. But that line, that Lowry line, they dominated Montreal. When they were on the ice, Montreal could not.
Yeah,
There was
Lowry had 2 goals the other night,
oh yeah,
including the
but
penalty shot too.
they
So
I know, but they were in the second period. I think I remember watching because I watched the game and then I watched it again for the show, and I just kind of zipped through until every time Lowry's line was on the ice. When Lowry's line was on the ice against Montreal in the second period, I don't think that the Montreal line got out of their zone. I think
Yep.
every time they got the puck, they got it in their own end. They moved it in. They circled. They cycled. They got shots. Their offensive zone time was like 80-90% in the second period. I mean, it was just
yeah.
ridiculous. It's just like, and they're three big guys. They're strong.
And it's interesting,
They-
right? Because I think
Oh.
when you get domination like that down low, it covers up maybe some perceived deficiencies that we've been talking about in the defensive zone.
Right. And because they get the advantage of playing against a lot of times either the third line of the other team, the third or fourth line, or
Yeah.
they get matched up against the other team's best offensive line, which they tend to not be as good defensively, similar to when when Scheifele and Connor and Iafallo play against another team's third
Yeah.
line, which is a Czechie line. They have a hard time like defending, right? If they're in their own zone. So I agree with you. That line, it's going to be a shame because when the Velarde comes back, I'm assuming he's going to go back to playing with Wheeler or with Scheifele and Connor.
Yep.
Where's Iafallo going to go? How are the dominoes going to fall? Because Nemestikov has played really well with playing center with Perfetti and Ehlers. They're a completely different line. Like they're all 6 feet and under. They're all small but can skate and very shifty. And then you throw them out and then you follow them up with a third line where the guys are all 6'2", 6'3", 225 pounds. Like it's just a completely different line, right? But it'll be interesting to see how that all works out. Maybe there'll be other injuries and it'll be a moot
Rich,
point.
I hate to caution to you.
What?
As the coach said, don't borrow problems until the time
I
comes.
know. But I just like that combination. I hope no matter what that Niederreiter stays on that line. He just brings something that Iafallo did not bring, or maybe he didn't have the time to bring.
Funny enough, Nemestikov and Niederreiter were 2 of the deadline acquisitions last year for the Jets at the deadline. So you could start to kind of see that identity shift kind of start to take hold there as well. Really quick question. We'll talk about the week, but why then we'll kind of tie in because it has to do with the Montreal game. But what do you think of the play so far of Laurent Brossoit through 2 games?
It's been okay. He wasn't great in his first game. He was a little bit better in Montreal, which is fine. I mean, he's not, you know what? He's not Connor Hellebuyck, but you know what I like? What is this now? How many games have the Jets? Actually, I should probably turn on the light.
It's 8 games, and Hellebuyck has played 6 of them, and Brossoit's played 2.
Perfect. Right. So, like we said, 3 out of every 4. We said that at the beginning of the year. I think that Hellebuyck to be sharp, if the Jets make the playoffs, and I think they will, for them to have any chance, Hellebuyck has to be their best player. He's got to be playing at a Vezina level. And for me, he can't be at that level going into playoffs as he's playing more than 60 games. He has to play no more than 60 games. Okay, maybe 62. Okay, fine. But I'm just saying there should be 20 games that Brossoit plays. And of those 20 games, if he can play 500, I'm happy. Right now, he's 0-1-1.
Yeah.
Okay. He's on the road. He's in Montreal. That's a tough place to win. The Jets have had a really hard time over the years winning. But again, is it his fault that they ended up getting 3-3? I don't think so. I mean, there was a couple of defensive zone coverage. How did he get open on that rush? It was a defensive zone lap. Why didn't they kill
even that game against Vegas, Rhett? They could have won that game. They shot themselves in the foot as a unit before it even got to him in that Vegas game.
I know. And the other thing, the other thing we have to remember too, I don't know if that was mentioned in the comments, but the other thing to mention is that overall, even in the games where the Jets have lost or lost in overtime, they have outplayed their opposition. Like the Jets, They have outshot,
There's one-
and for the most time they've outchanced. It's just been every time they play against the team and they get 45, 50 shots, it's because the other goalies played his very best game in 10 years. He plays against the Jets. It's just unbelievable. So all I'm saying is
the way things are going, watch
over 82 games, if they play that way, they will win way more games than they lose, and it'll eventually work itself out.
the way things are going. Watch Blake Wheeler score 2 goals tonight.
Yeah, exactly. It's always the other team comes back and the other team, like that player. Yeah, I just love to see Wheeler plays 9 or 10 minutes tonight and he gets a hat trick. I know that's ugh.
Maybe they'll put him on the ice up a goal and he'll get an empty net goal or something.
I'm going to make this prediction. The only way the Jets win this game tonight, they have to kill the penalties. They cannot, or they have to be even on 5 or with the power plays. If they allow New York Rangers to score a power play goal, the Jets must score a power play goal. But if they take like a whole bunch of stupid penalties and they get all these goals scored against them, they're going to be in big trouble because New York has a very good power play.
This comment. There are 5 players on the roster who weren't here before March 1st, 2023. Nemestikov, Niederreiter, Iafallo, Capardi, and Velarde. I definitely see a big difference with those players in the lineup.
I couldn't agree more.
Why? They are defensively responsible.
Yeah, and they played in systems where that was pushed. And that's what Rick Bowness is trying to initiate with these guys because they've been playing kind of defensively for such a long time. It's almost you got to change their whole way of thinking. But I agree with Rob's comment here, 100%. These 5 guys they've helped to change the culture of the team, and they've made the Jets deeper. Are they superstars? Well, you could say maybe Velarde is one in the making. The other guys, the other 4 guys, I don't know about Capardi, but I'd say the other 4 guys, they are dependable, reliable, second, third line NHLers, and they make the Jets deeper. They make them more capable of scoring on more lines and more even scoring throughout their lineup. I agree with you. The Jets, considering what they were forced to do with having to trade Dubois, they did very well in getting these 3 players, plus getting a second round draft pick in this coming year's draft. So I agree.
It's certainly, and I think too, of the 8 games, 7 of them the Jets have played decent. The only one I would put in that outlier of need a better effort all the way around was the LA game. So hey, if 7 out of every 8 games are going to be decent efforts and you're not going to win some of those games, I think a lot of fans will take that.
Yep.
Because last year it seemed to me they were way more up and down and unpredictable on a weekly basis.
Well, in the second half of the season, up until Christmas, they were one of the best teams in the league, right? So because I think they were
maybe having those 5 in the lineup now will help stabilize that second half. Love that seems to come annually from January to the end of the year, and then they do just enough to get in.
I agree. It's going to be really interesting. I know you want to eventually move this way, but it's going to be interesting on tonight's game because I'm always interested when the Jets, like when they play Minnesota or they play St. Louis or they play, I don't know, whoever your team is. We kind of know those teams. They've built certain rivalries. They have a certain style. And it's sort of the Western Conference Central Division foes. So you kind of know how they are. Well, we don't see the Rangers often. We see them once a year, right? Maybe, usually once a year. So to see an Eastern Conference team and a good team, a team that was in the actually, did they make it to the Eastern Final last year? Did they lose to Florida in the final? I think it was, wasn't it?
A couple years ago, yeah.
So, yeah, but they were for sure, like they were in the playoffs the last several years. They're a veteran team. They've got, actually, I was watching, they only have 4 players under the age of 20 in their forwards. Everyone else is over 30. So they're primed to win. Like they are geared up. They want to win in the next 1 to 3 years is kind of their window to win. So you could argue Rangers are as good as any team out of the East, including, the Bruins and the Leafs. So to see the Jets match up against them in terms of the style of play, how the Rangers play, it's a really good, for me, a really good, what do you call it, the barometer, a good measuring stick for how do the Jets match up against other really good teams in the other conference, because the Rangers are as good as anybody. How did the Rangers do against Vancouver? I should have looked. Like, did they win or lose on Saturday night?
That they won. If they win tonight, they're gonna be 5-0 or 6-0 on the current road trip.
Okay, so they won in Vancouver. Was that in overtime or they just won outright?
No, they won in Seattle, one in Calgary, one in Edmonton, one in Vancouver.
Okay, they won in Vancouver. Okay,
So they're
and
4-0
they're a
on
good
the
hockey
current
team.
trip.
Yeah, they are a good hockey team.
They're a good hockey team, and as they should be. Everybody seems to be forgetting about Jacob Trouba, but a lot of the oxygen here is with the former captain's return,
Yeah,
and rightfully so.
yeah.
Let's talk about some other things. We talked about the victory, which was the game before Montreal. Who the heck was that? It escapes me. There was a very, very good team.
Oh, that was Detroit. They won on the road.
Oh yeah, in
Great
Detroit.
game.
Yeah,
Great
yeah,
game.
and the Michigan kids coming through to win them the game. Kyle Connor Hellebuck, etc.
Yep.
Who seems to have turned the corner.
I agree with you. Hellebuck has played much better the last 3 or 4 games. Yep.
But really quickly, let's talk about the rest of the National Hockey League. I looked at the time and we only got 20 minutes left in our show.
Yep.
Where the heck this time gone?
Hang on, I'm gonna throw on the light in the room because the sun is setting.
Yeah, no, I was talking to somebody yesterday, Red, who you're actually very, very familiar with, who might even be watching the show tonight. I just said to him, I said the show has no format. It's just a coffee table chat between two people who like talking hockey. And this gentleman's reply was, that's the way it should be. Natural conversation. So that's always our goal with this show, of course. Just wanted to make quick mention. We'll talk about the heavy topic toward the end. The unfortunate incident that happened in England. Player, a former Pittsburgh Penguins prospect, getting a blade to the throat, ultimately and tragically killing him on the weekend. Condolences out to his family and everybody that was a fan of his and his friends and family. Obviously, very, very sort of freak accident, has close ties to a number of the Winnipeg Jets. Because he played at the University of Minnesota Duluth. So that would be with Alex Iafallo, Neil Pionk. It's a bunch of Minnesota UMD kids on there. Pionk as well. But yeah, so it's one of those things that, unfortunately, sports seems to take for granted from time to time. Most cases, it's been repairable, but unfortunately, this one wasn't. And all the best to his family as they grieve his shocking passing. One thing that was noted this afternoon, I had a note sent to me, courtesy of Ian Lewis. It looks like the European, or at least the English Hockey Federation, with backing from the International Ice Hockey Federation, is now mandating that net guards be worn to prevent the skates coming up in the net and throat area, to just avoid tragedies. And, unfortunately, for a completely different reason, I had the ability to see just how sharp skates are when they come off of those machines and how sharp they are in general. Just a little brush and you did a cut the size of pretty dead. So when that is unfortunately not intended for the net area or any area really that isn't the ice, they are very, very dangerous. Those skate blades, and you hope for the best in a lot of those scenarios. I just wanted to mention that as well.
Mhm.
Because it shook a lot of my hockey circles. When we found out about it on Sunday afternoon, there was some
Yeah,
discussion around the rink on Sunday night about it. At least where I was.
yeah.
Uh, with that out of the way, with there was the Tim Hortons Heritage Classic last night, and dun da da dun, Connor McDavid made his return. Uh, to the surprise of absolutely nobody. Um, I made the joke to I think it was John Ginger, who I was working with last night on our MWJHL broadcast, and I said, "Boy, there hasn't been a more anticipated outdoor game that's in more must-win territory for both teams." Um, since both Edmonton and Calgary are in danger of having their season slip away. The Oilers picking up the victory thanks to Evander Kane going Superman, basically.
Yeah, he
Um,
had a heck of a game. Wow. Oh, he was the best
and then
player on the ice by far.
Stuart Skinner picking up his first win of the
Stewart's gonna
season
played well, yeah. But
while
Evander
honoring
Kane,
Grant Fuhr. Yeah, the Grant
yeah,
Fuhr setup. Um, I have a question though, Rhett, and it pertains to the Calgary Flames. Where do they go from here?
wow, yeah,
Because they have Trifoli, they don't have Trifoli, sorry, they have the defenseman Hannafin, they have Lindholm as pending UFAs. How does this help or hurt the negotiations with those two players? Because I can honestly say that outside of that opening night win against the Jets, where you could argue, Calgary didn't really deserve to win that
no.
game.
Jets
Uh,
outplayed him. It was only because of Markstrom playing like a
yeah.
man on fire.
So
Yeah,
where do the Flames go from here? Because it seems to be that same old step back that we saw last year
yeah,
to an
that
even
was.
worse form this year.
I can't figure it out, Michael. You're asking me what did the Flames do? I don't know. I cannot figure that team out because to me, they have a really good general manager. They got jammed on a whole bunch of things with Johnny Gaudreau and then with Kachuk requesting to be traded, then got back Uyghur and Huberdeau in that in being forced to play there. And similar to how the Jets had to trade Pierre-Luc or sign and trade Pierre-Luc Dubois. And I think Calgary made out really well to get Huberdeau and Uyghur. You could argue Uyghur was the right next to Ekblad was the second best defenseman on that team for it at the time, and played with Ekblad, so he was the number one pairing. Huberdeau was the number one line right winger, although he plays more like a centerman in terms of he's like Wheeler in a lot of ways in terms of his ability to see the ice to pass the puck. But I'm just saying, I can't figure that team out. They have so much talent. They have so many good. I would argue, you could argue on paper, their defensive core is better than the Jets with Hannafin, Uyghur, Tanev, who's Zadorov. Just those four
Zadorov,
guys
yeah.
alone. I would take any of those guys before I take probably the bottom 3 or 4 guys
Listen,
from the
man.
Jets.
I would take that. I would take that detour over what the Oilers have. They might be the second best defense in that division behind Vegas
on paper.
on paper. Yeah,
On paper, and that's what I'm saying. So what's going on there? What is the problem? They have a good centerman. They picked a really good, a veteran guy, a guy who's who understands relationships and teammates,
right.
and he's been loyal to the Calgary Flames. Like, I just cannot figure that team out. They should be way better than how they are, but I don't know. Like, I see the comments; they're in complete disarray. I agree, but what's the thing there? I can't put my finger on it. I don't know what it is. Like. They have great goaltending. They have a great goalie. They've got great players on paper, on defense, on an offense. Why can they not play their system the way the coach wants them to play it and generate offense from that and win games? I don't know. Are they not together? Are they not? Like, I've heard talk a few weeks ago. Maybe you can respond. I just heard talk from some of the players that, oh, the offense is not connected with the defense, or forwards are not connected with the defensive pairings, and they're not playing as a 5-man unit. Well, work on that. Then change that. Like, I'm just saying, it's sort of like a husband, and a wife, and and there's a marriage counselor. It says, or the husband and wife, they meet the marriage counselor, and they say, well, we want to be better as a married couple. We want to do better. And then he hears them out. He says, well, you've got to start to be nice to each other and to tell each other how much you love each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they say, really, it's that difficult? He says, yeah, just do it. Like, just like start being nice to each other. Start telling each other you love them. I mean, how hard is that? But it's the same thing with Flames. Like, yeah, we're not connected. Well, get connected. Yeah, we're not playing well together as a 5-man unit in our own zone. Well, start playing well. Like, it's not rocket science. It's hockey.
I realize this might be an afterthought,
Yeah.
but how much do the Calgary Flames miss Tyler Toffoli?
It's one guy.
Like, but to me, Tyler Toffoli for Yegor Sharangovich seems like a significant drop off at this present moment.
Yeah, but he didn't want to be there. Okay, he didn't want to stay in Calgary. Okay, I get it.
To me, Rhett, this is the way it's gonna end in Calgary. Lindholm traded, Hanifin traded, Markstrom traded. Blow it up.
I agree. Well, I can make this prediction. If they don't get it turned around by Christmas, and it's not that far away. It's only 2 months
Less
away.
than that.
Yeah. If
The
they don't
Black
start
Friday
by
end
the
of
end of the year,
November seems to be that benchmark.
when the calendar, I'm just saying, if there is no change in the play by the end of the calendar year, by January, that team is looking to change, and they're going to make a bunch of trades at the deadline or before the deadline to get back the assets and to make a changeover in the team, because something's not right. The whole chemistry on that team then is not right, and I don't know if I don't think Hanifin's the problem. He's a very good hockey player, but I don't know what it is. Did they bring in Kadri? Did they lose Toffoli? There's some really good players there.
Yeah.
Nikita Zadorov, he could play on my team. That guy is an animal and he's a beast, and he's well defended. And I don't know if you heard his comments. He basically said he says, we're playing like, well, he didn't use the word crap, but he said, we're playing like crap. And if I was the fans, I'd boo too, because I don't want to watch crap. That's what he said. Yeah. And it's true. Like, he's the only one that has the guts to say it. And he's calling his teammates, including himself. But why aren't there other guys on that team? He's not even a captain. I don't even know if he's an assistant. I don't think he's.
But here's the problem, Rick. You basically booed Daryl Sutter out of town, saying you didn't like Daryl Sutter. It's all Daryl's fault. We'll be fine under a new coach. Well, new coach, same result. So now it's on the players.
Yeah, and I don't think it's on the coach.
Maybe Daryl wasn't the problem all along, and maybe Daryl tried to get more out of these players, and eventually, you can only push so far.
Yep, I would agree. And it's not the general manager and it's not the coach, because if you
had new general manager, new coach.
No, but if you would survey other teams and you look at this lineup on paper at the start of the year, you'd say what Craig Conroy has created there is a playoff team. You and I talked about it.
It's a playoff team, 100%.
On paper, that team should be winning
70% this is just that.
Yeah.
A piece of paper.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And why they're not, that's the $1 million. Whoever can figure that out, whatever. But I don't know, like, is Conroy, how much patience does he have? He just hired his coach.
We're about to find out.
You're not going to fire the coach. But I agree with you. If they don't start winning by the end of the calendar year, starting in January, that team is purging. That team is changing. They're going to move out those UFAs, and they're going to bring in younger players and assets and the draft picks. Yeah,
one team benefiting from Edmonton's slide and Calgary's slide, the Vancouver Canucks. Do they look good?
They are good. Vancouver, yeah, they've really played well.
They finally got some goaltending in Thatcher Demko and
I think they got healthy.
Casey Smith.
Yeah, but I think they got healthy. Like they were.
They did. They did, and they got Sushi from
not healthy last year. Peterson was not healthy at times last year. Like they were. Yeah, they were. Brock Besser was injured. Now all those guys are healthy. So yeah,
it's interesting, right? And somebody was telling me, it's 10 games, and this team's a surprise, and that team's a surprise, and that team's a surprise. This team's a struggle, that team's a struggle. Oh, I said to this person, and I kind of said it point blank. I said, with all due respect, sir, how many games are we into the season? 6 to 8, he said. And I said, yeah. Some of these teams, I said, I would encourage you to check in with me toward the end of the season. Once we hit the 60, 65, 70 game mark, there will be a market correction at some point.
Yeah, I would agree.
And some teams just have their best 10 games right out of the chute, and they look like Stanley Cup contenders.
Well, look at Colorado. They went 6-0, and they've been shut out their last 2 games against very average teams on paper.
I mean, to tie this to the NFL, to use as an example, look at the San Francisco 49ers. A lot of them were ready to anoint them at 5-0 as the next perfect team, 15-1. 3 straight losses. Oh. Ouch. Even NFL 1-4 Minnesota Vikings. Now won 3 in a row. Granted, they lost their quarterback to an Achilles injury, and that'll probably change their fortunes. But still, it's not how you start or how you end or how you are in the middle.
There's time for Calgary still. If you're a Calgary,
it's an 82-game season.
Calgary. There's time, but it's got to be soon. Like we talk about, right, by American Thanksgiving, by the end of November, you got to be on the track. You got to be starting to ramp it up and start winning and be either in a playoff position or knocking on the door right next to it, because it's very hard to be. I mean, it happens once in a while with a last place team making the playoffs, like the Blues did that one year they won the cup. But I'm just saying, in general, it doesn't happen that often. So, I cannot put my finger on. I wish I could call up Calgary. I wish I could call up Craig Conroy. I like them as a player. I wish I could call up and say, Craig, I know what the problem is. You got to do this, this, and this. And he'd say, Rick, thank you very much. And he'd do it. And the Flames would turn around. They'd start winning. And then he'd write me a big check. But it's not going to happen because, number one, I don't know Craig Conroy. Number two, he would never take my call. And number three, even if he did, he would not listen to me. And he wouldn't pay me if I gave him all the good advice. He would never give me credit for it. So I'm just saying, who knows what that is? If I was Craig Conroy, it would be driving me crazy, because I would look at this team and I'd look at who I've brought in, what I've done. I'm working on signing these UFAs to some contracts. I'm negotiating. I'm doing all this. And yet it's still not working. And I've won only 2 games out of 8 this year. I would be frustrated beyond all measure if I was Craig Conroy, because it doesn't make sense. So anyway,
there's a lot of things that don't make sense. That's why it's even a marathon, not a sprint.
Yep. Okay. What else are we going to talk about in the next 5 minutes?
Really quickly, 5 minutes. The week it is for the Winnipeg Jets tonight against the Rangers, Thursday in Vegas, Saturday afternoon in Arizona.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the schedule? And the Jets begin what is a road-heavy portion of their schedule?
Yeah, so the Jets play. Are we going to have a show next Monday, right? Yeah.
We are, yep.
Okay, so we got 3 games, 1 at home, 2 on the road, 2 against 2 very good teams, and then Arizona, who's an up-and-comer. Yeah, I think, you know what? It just shows you the league. There's just so much parity now. There's no spots on the bingo card, so to speak, where you could put down a chip and say, yeah, I get
well,
that.
Spots on the bingo card will be defined in April when your team is ranked 26 through 32.
Yeah, maybe. But I'm just saying there's no easy, like even you used to say, Arizona, yeah, that could be an easy win, or so-and-so, this team. That. There's not that. Even Chicago, the last few years, they weren't great. Well, they're a pretty good team. They're not going to win all their games, but they're going to be interesting. You better not.
Arizona, I would put in that boat too. You could go in there and you could push them around.
Yeah.
Well, I've watched 2 Arizona Coyote games, and they look more than respectable in both of them.
Exactly. So I'm just saying you can't pick that. So that being said, I think the Jets, they're going to play well. Are they going to win tonight against the Rangers? There's a chance, and here it is. This is what you got to look at this. This is the last game that New York has on their 5 or 6 game road trip.
Yep.
And teams usually, I just know that with the Jets, on the last game of a road trip, a lot of times you're thinking about getting home. You're tired of wearing the same suit to and from the games. You're tired of hotel bedrooms or hotel beds. You're tired of eating on the road. Yeah, you want to get home. And so a lot of guys maybe have 1 foot on the bus already or 1 foot in the plane. And who knows? But they're a good team, and if you take a lot of penalties against the Rangers, you're going to pay. So I think they can win against the Rangers. I'd like to see them play a lot better against Vegas, and that's a tough one though. Winning on the road in Vegas, that's a hard place to win. And then Arizona, I'm going to say, you know what? I'm going to go 1-1-1. I have to.
You're gonna take the Darryl special right down the middle, right?
I will. Well, last week you picked 2-0, and I picked 1-1, and they went 1-0-1. So I was closer than you were. So,
well, if they wouldn't have blown a 2-2 lead, we'd be
exactly. I was already. Game was 3-1 early in the second period. I was like, "Oh, Michael, I'm never going to hear."
Yeah, and I'd be having the confetti and the champagne and all that stuff on this show.
So I think they're going to go 1-1-1. How about you?
2-0-1.
Okay. So who do you
win tonight? Get a point in Vegas, win in Arizona.
Okay. Yeah. I think, you know what, and I would argue that there's a good chance they're probably going to play Hellebuck tonight and in Vegas, and then play Brossoit either in Arizona or then in St. Louis the following game. So
my suspicion, and I haven't talked to anybody close to the team, nor would they tell anybody. My suspicion is we'll see Brossoit Tuesday in St. Louis, just because of Hellebuck's track record in afternoon games.
Yeah, I think so too. I could see Hellebuck playing the next 3 in a row. I could. Yeah, for sure. So
yeah, that to me would be acceptable and kind of follows along the lines of what we've been seeing so far.
Yep.
Do you have any closing thoughts, Rick, before we sign off?
Actually, I was going to say I have been very impressed. I've been watching just a little bit here and there. Well, I was going to say very impressed with Vancouver, very unimpressed with Anaheim. Ooh, that team has not played well. Or no, San Jose. Sorry, San Jose has been terrible.
Well, they're 0-8-1 or whatever they are.
And they got some good hockey players in that team too. I can't figure it out, but again, that really surprises me. And then, you know what's actually the other thing that's not surprising to me, but it makes sense, is the teams that we thought would be good, they're right up there. The Bruins, the Leafs, the Rangers, and New Jersey. They're right up there. And then in the Western Conference, LA, and Vegas, right up there, right where you'd expect them to be. So, yeah. But right now, the Central, I would say, is really wide open.
I mean, everything is where we thought it would be.
Yeah. You have froze. I'm not sure if that's you or me, but you just froze. So, but we could sign off the show. It's actually 6:30, so I will say goodbye. You can spin the bubbles. Oh, there you are. You're back.
Oh, yeah. Sorry, my internet's not dead here right now.
All good. Right on. Enjoy the game.
Flames are in complete disarray. That's what happens. Yeah. Okay, yeah, we're back next Monday. The game in St. Louis is next Tuesday, right?
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay,
so we're
so
going to go
back
at 6
at our
o'clock.
regular time, 6 p.m. and that's Monday.
Sounds good.
Okay, Rick, we'll get everybody off of here, wrap up our broadcast, and I'll talk to you off air for a minute.
Sounds good. Thanks, Michael.
Right. For Rick Petty, Michael Justin, have a great rest of the week. Good day from Winnipeg. We'll talk to you next Monday. Have a great week, everybody.